Okay, welcome back to episode number 36 of Happy Hour with Heather and Guest. So much has changed since the last week. I am no longer afflicted by COVID, so hopefully I won't be coughing. I'm also back home, as you can tell. I'm not at my aunt and uncle's house anymore in isolation, and I've got my trademark fedora. Heather, of course, is in her usual recording zone with all the wonderful posters.
Yes, I have a Chelsea Wolf t-shirt on.
Nice, nice.
And you sound, I have to say, you sound a lot
Thank
better.
you. Yeah, no, I feel a lot better. I sound a lot better, and everything is as it should be,
Yeah.
so that we can dive right into this episode and bring you fresh those of you out there watching, not the royal we, but I guess this would be vosotros, the you, the or ustedes. I mean, we're not formal around here, so either way, whatever the collective you is, we're going to talk about three bands today. This was my selection. So we're going to talk about a group called the Book of Wyrms, spelled Wyrms. They're from Richmond, Virginia. And then we're going to talk about another group called Yellow Devil Sauce. And I want to say they're Greek. I'm not 100% sure. This is off top. And then the last group that we're going to talk about is called Beehoover, and I believe they're from Germany. And they got their name combining like a honeybee and a Hoover vacuum to make Beehoover. So either way, let's kick things off with Book of Wyrms, and we have three albums. The first one is called Sci-Fi Fantasy. And the track that you chose to kick things off was called Infinite Walrus, which
Yeah.
is immediately one of my favorite track names of all time. What were your thoughts on Infinite Walrus?
Yeah, they have really cool song names. Really lovely ethereal vocals. I like how they play psychedelic doom music, and this has space rock and some bluesy elements to it. It's an intoxicating mix. I hear a lot of bass, and there is also some pretty cool guitar riffs. I like how it gets more quiet towards the middle and then builds back up.
Yeah, I wrote that I felt like this was the name of like a nuclear testing program, like from the 1950s. Like, we need to get all the materials ready for Infinite Walrus. That's the name of the hydrogen bomb we're developing. It's Project Infinite Walrus. Um, and then I just wrote, "Oh, you think there's a side head nod?" Yes, there was definitely, for those of you out there who aren't familiar, since my aneurysm, I don't really indulge in any headbanging out of fear that I'll jostle something loose. So instead, I do a very reserved side head nod like this. So when I really get into something, if you see the side head nod going, you know it's a jam. And yes, there was a side head nod going for Infinite Walrus. And this this reminded me when George Costanza was being set up once on Seinfeld. He was asking about his potential date, and he says, "What's her cheek like? I like a good cheek." And I don't know why, but like when I was listening to this song, I got the sense of like, you know, I like a good riff. I like a good, beat. I like a good cheek. Does it? And it just reminded me of that. So if you couldn't tell, I'm feeling much better. I'm able to make more obscure references again.
Yeah,
Um,
you're back on your game.
something I never thought I would say, but I'm glad that I did, is I was hooked by Infinite Walrus. I never thought that there would ever be cause in my life to say that phrase, and I'm so glad that I can say I was hooked by Infinite Walrus. And it had a cool bass breakdown. You had brought this up. I felt like this was more on the psychedelic stoner side than on the doom side, even though it incorporates both elements. I feel like if you and I, the music that we like, I feel like on a spectrum, like on one end of the spectrum is just straight up doom, and on the other end is like psychedelic stoner. Most of the music will go in between somewhere. I feel like this one leaned a little bit more towards the psychedelic stoner side, but still, Infinite Walrus kicking things off great. And then the next track was called Sour Wolf.
Yeah. And this song has a bluesy feel to it also. Has more synthesizer parts. I like how it's slower paced and down tuned and has repetition like a great doom, like great doom songs have. When the guitar riff goes off and then the synthesizer kicks in, it's like this exclamation, like an exclamation point at the end of a sentence. Really changes the energy of the song.
Yeah, this one was 11 minutes, which sometimes I take note of the time going into it. Because this is like right in this 11 minutes is like right in the sweet spot where like you can take your time with it. And usually songs that are 11 minutes, not that there's like a system to any of this, but songs that are over 10 minutes, I'm usually like, oh, let me take note of this because it's going to be slow and in my wheelhouse. This song reminded me of the song The End by The Doors, not musically at all, but sort of in the spirit. I felt like that song is unique and it captures a certain feeling, the way that it's orchestrated and constructed. And I felt similar vibes from this song. Um, it's real slow, like molasses. And then I was afraid to shut my eyes because I felt like I was going to disappear. So I had to listen to the song with my eyes open. Um, and now I am a disciple. Like when we listened to Slow Green Thing, I think I revealed after listening to a few of their songs, I was like, well, I'm clearly a disciple of this man now. So, Book of Wyrms, I'm clearly a disciple. Uh, and then I liked the incorporation of the keyboards, and you just blast off in the stratosphere. It's nice with a lot of these jams. You can kind of kick back and go on like a bit of a sonic journey, and you don't have to leave the comfort of your off-white couch. You can just sort of kick back. So that was it. Sci-fi slash fantasy was the first album we listened to. Next up is, I believe it's Remythologizer, and the first track off Remythologizer is Undead Pegasus.
Yeah. The vocals on this are a little bit more upfront and more pronounced. About halfway through the song, there's just bass and drums, and then the guitar comes in, and it almost sounds like a horse galloping. It gets anthemic, and then the guitar goes off on this really cool riff. On the album cover, there's a Pegasus, and it looks like a fantasy story, and the Pegasus is flying to a fantasy land. It's really cool.
Yeah, this one I said faster tempo into more of a dot dot dot. I can't figure out what to compare it to. So there's something happening here that's faster. And then now the so when I had my previous show, Fistful of Faithful, often I would ask my mother to be a guest and listen to music. And frequently she would compare the songs that we listened to the Nintendo game Metroid. She would say, "This sounds like Metroid." So then that became like a go-to stock phrase, for not music that would sound like a video game, but like if music was fast tempoed and a little thrashy, I knew that she would pull out that this sounds like Metroid. But when I began to listen to parts of Undead Pegasus, I was like, well, kind of does sound like Castlevania. So I don't know if the members of the band were playing Nintendo when they wrote this song and that it happened to influence them at all. That's certainly not meant as a dig by any stretch. That's just what I felt. Um, and then I wrote, they're doing stuff here. I can't put my finger on it, but it's impressive and it's out of my depth. So there are times where I feel like I just don't have the background in music to be able to articulate what's happening. I can make things up and I could say, it's like a meadly solo, not like a wah solo. But again, though, that's not technical. Uh, so
We should take some music theory classes.
we should, although I feel like the magic would be gone if we did that.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be nice to sound more intelligent, but at the same time, I feel like we come at it from such a pure and innocent place where we use the tools at our disposal.
Yeah.
I don't want to like be just another talking head that has a PhD in musicology that can tell you about timbre and pitch and stuff like that. I want to say it's got a meadly solo.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what they were doing with the song. It was out of my depth, but that's fine. Like I'll just tip my fedora and say good job. And then the second track we had on Remythologizer was Dust Toad.
Yeah. And this is a song to get lost in. The vocals are very soothing, and the guitar has a tone that I found to be very calming. The lyrics tell a story of a dust toad, and I was trying to determine if it's the dust toad with that has the third eye that will turn you to dust, and they have this magical toad on their tour poster. If you get a chance, check it out. It's really really neat. It's on their Instagram page, and they tag the artist in it so you can check out her work too. But it was from the mytholog and I can't say it. Pre-mythologizer tour, November 2018. So I thought that was pretty awesome.
Cool. Yeah. I always appreciate when you do some digging and figure out these things. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I will definitely go back and do some, look into all this stuff. With regard to Dust Toad, I enjoyed that they were slowing things back down again, since Undead Pegasus was a little quicker. Uh, this one, I also felt there was a great melody, and this one sort of erred on the doomier side rather than the stoner psychedelic side. I felt like it was a prophecy from an oracle. Like all of a sudden, I was, at Delphi or something in ancient Greece, and a prophecy was being told. I think I just wanted to use the word prophecy, but either way, so far the songs have all been they've been different but similar. It's very much paradoxical, um, but I've enjoyed them all. So, and then we just have one more album to go, Occult New Age, which is the most recent album, and the first track was Colossal Yield.
Yeah, and this has a classic throwback vibe to it. Has a cool groove. I like all the different sound effects made with the synthesizer. Killer drumming, and you can especially notice it towards the end of the song. I like how the guitar licks have a retro feel to them also.
Yeah, this one I liked the combination of heavy and light with regard to the riffs and the vocals. They do a great job sort of balancing the opposites. Um, I wrote it reminded me of something. I think it reminded me of a band called Sir Lord Baltimore, who put out a lot of albums in the early 70s. But I'm not 100% sure. That's just the feeling that I got at the time. Um, but I kept thinking like, oh, this reminds me of something. It's not similar to anything, but it just reminded me of something. And I also felt like a lot of times when you hear bands that you want to recommend to people, they're not necessarily as accessible. If you have a friend who likes music, but they're not into metal, and sometimes you're like, yeah, I think they'd like this, but I don't know if they're going to get it, so I'm not going to recommend it. But I feel like with Book of Wyrms, so much of it is accessible that you can be like, no, no, check these songs out. Even if you're not the biggest fan of heavier music, you're going to like this group. Um, so that was my 2 cents on Colossal Yield. And then we have Weather Worker. Is it? I think it's Weather Worker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I like this song, and this song, I thought it sounded a bit different than their other songs. The bass seems to be more prominent. The vocals float over the heavy guitars. There's a lot of tempo changes. It gets progressive or proggy, as a lot of reviewers like to say. I feel like they were letting loose and showing us their chops. I thought it was a really cool song.
A little Milton Berle action, just showing
Yeah,
showing the chops a little bit.
yeah,
Yep. Yep. Um, yeah, I it this so this time I was able to put my finger on it. The beginning of the song, or part of the beginning of the song, reminded me of the song "Fool in the Rain" by Led Zeppelin, which I'm not sure if you're how familiar you are with that, but I was really proud of myself for recognizing, oh, that's "Fool in the Rain," I think. Um, and then what else did I have to say? I like the drums and the psychedelic. And then for some reason, I don't know why, but it reminded me that so in 94, they made two movies about Wyatt Earp. They made one called Tombstone, which is the better film. And then they made one called Wyatt Earp with Kevin Costner. And it's not that great of a movie, but there's one scene where Kevin Costner is working for the railroad and he's like a bounty hunter and he meets Doc Holliday. And at one point, Doc Holliday reaches for the bottle of whiskey and he knocks it over, and Wyatt Earp catches it before it can break and shatter. And he pours Doc a drink and he puts the bottle down. And Doc Holliday just goes, "Do you believe in friendship, Wyatt Earp?" And I was like, that's probably one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And I don't know why, but listening to this song in that moment, and probably because I knew I was reviewing the music with you, I thought of "Do you believe in friendship, Wyatt Earp?" So if you're out there and you're listening, you're trying to find jams that make you feel good and like contemplate the world and where your place in it, then check out Book of Wyrms, especially Weather Worker.
yeah,
So
yeah,
there you go. And then we had one more tune, Dracula Practice, another great
yeah.
title.
I like how she sings about him practicing his moves, and since he lost his mind, he found his way. The song has a great vibe to it. It's kind of spooky. Another great song name too. Oh, and I wanted to mention also that I put all three of these albums we talked about on our YouTube playlist for this week, for this week's episode. I make a playlist, and all three of these albums are on the playlist. Definitely give it a listen. This is really, really good music that deserves to be heard.
Yeah, I mean, Infinite Walrus is a phenomenal title. Dracula Practice might be my personal favorite. Um, and I think this was probably my favorite song that we've listened to of theirs so far. This, I feel like, again, it's more on the stoner psychedelic side of the spectrum. and I tend to be more of a doom person, but that doesn't really mean anything. Um, but I also feel like they've got a sound. Like I feel like if you were to put on Book of Worms, I'd be able to pick them out of a sonic lineup, so to speak. But yeah, Dracula Practice, aside from being a great title, probably my favorite jam that we've listened to so far. And I would urge all of you take up. Heather puts in a lot of time and effort cobbling these playlists together so that you can better understand what we're talking about when I go off on my crazy tangents or when she finds research into things the bands have done. Excuse me. So yeah, so that was Book of Worms from Richmond, Virginia. And then Beehoover, I guess if we go chronologically, uh, when I was in Hong Kong, I was doing a YouTube spelunking mission one night looking for bands, and the algorithm suggested the song Pain Power by Beehoover. And I remember just spending a few minutes staring at the cover because the cover is of a rabbit, but in between the rabbit's ears, it's like hieroglyphics. It's like crazy hieroglyphics. And I just remember trying to make heads or tails of what was happening. And I remember hearing Pain Power and really being captivated by, and then finding out it's just bass and drums. And I was like, wow, what they're doing with just bass. Because a lot of times you hear bass and drums and you think, okay, it's going to be like Ohm, where it's going to be sort of mystical and very much of a Middle Eastern type feel. Or it's going to be like Some, for example, where it's much more on the metal kind of side to it. And I feel like this one was just sort of rocking. And what they were doing was it was really interesting. Uh, so I kept listening to Pain Power on repeat, and then eventually I think I got into some more of their stuff. But the other thing I like about the band, well, why don't I let you jump in?
Okay. Yeah. Um, I was really impressed with the fullness of the sound with just bass and drums. But the song Pain Power, I thought I heard some keyboards in there too. They say they're a sludge duo, so I was expecting harsher vocals, but that's not the case with this song. The vocals were more melodic. When I looked them up, I saw they have 7 releases, and the latest is 2020. Um, the first dates back to 2005, and this album, this is their third release. I like how they make the songs sound different from each other. There are different vocal styles, different tempos, and the bass can make a lot of different sounds. And tone, a lot of different tones. It always keeps you, you know, keeps you guessing on what are they going to do next.
Yeah, they're definitely a unique sounding band. One of the other things I liked is because they're from Germany, and my guess is English is not their first language. I always love bands that sing in English, either with an accent or the word, some of the words are pronounced in such a way that it really gives it an interesting slant to it. So a lot of what I enjoyed about their music is not only the musicianship and the way they play, but also how everything comes together. Like lyrically, it's like a nuanced take on a lot of stuff. So I had never heard a band like them before. Um, I mean, obviously I've heard bands that are just bass drums, but I had never heard anyone like Beehoover. And I was like, we sort of, I owe it to the world to put them in the spotlight with this show because I feel like part of what we do is we shine a light on bands who people normally wouldn't find, um, except that we take the time to do the YouTube spelunking and whatnot. But yeah, they I felt like I like sharing my adventures with you before I met you of like bands I would listen to in Hong Kong or Macau or even when I so the next band uh I think I discovered Yellow Devil Sauce in a similar way where it was like another YouTube type thing. But I remember very much I was looking for kind of like 90s era throwback stuff. And um and then I think this album Zulu, like the whole album got in the algorithm and I remembered listening to the whole album and I was like, "Oh my goodness, this must mean something. I didn't skip a single song." So, what are before I go off on my tangents, what are your thoughts on Yellow Devil Sauce?
Well, I saw an article that mentioned that this band came in first in a Battle of the Bands contest in the year 2000. It also said that they received a good critique in Metal Hammer, so I thought that was pretty cool. It also said the band's sound is mainly influenced by the Seattle scene and bands like Tool and Stone Temple Pilots. I'm guessing that the band name means hot peppers, a hot pepper sauce. But I really like the name. I, it's a great name. Um, Great band name and great alternative rock and hard rock.
Yeah, there are just time like I mean I consider myself really to be a child of the 90s. Even I mean even though I spent a lot of my formative years in the 80s, I don't think I necessarily appreciated the music. It didn't mean as much to me. Like I was 12 when Nevermind came out. I was in at my adolescence, so I feel like that's when I really gravitated towards that sound. And there are times where I'm like, you know what? I just want to listen to a good 90s band again. And I remember being really thrilled to find Yellow Devil Sauce because they do like the songs are that sort of alternative style that would have been on the radio, in 1994. And I love finding bands that sort of have tapped into something pure like that, um, but are contemporary. Like they've found something really good. And again, they do a similar thing like Beehoover, where I guess because they're a Greek band singing in English, some of the word pronunciation is a little bit different than what I'm used to. So it gives it more of a nuanced feel to it, which is really cool. I mean, I'm blown the fact that not only can these bands write songs in a language that isn't their first, but they make them that good. I mean, I can't even wrap my head around it. It's incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, half of what's wonderful about doing the show with you is finding these bands or hearing about bands and shining the spotlight on them and getting them, get my hope is that other people are going to be like, oh yeah, that sounds exactly like what I'm looking for. Let me check out Book of Wyrms and Beehoover and Yellow Devil Sauce.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. If more people,
uh,
if more people could listen to them, that
okay.
would be great.
Yes, sorry, my mother is calling. I'm gonna decline her and tell her that I will text her right back. But hey, this for those of you out there who wondered if this show, was live or had bells and yeah, obviously you can tell I'm not above getting a FaceTime request from my mother during a recording with Heather. So
Actually, that's happened more than once.
Yeah, well, usually I speak to her at 5, but I
Uh-huh.
think she had plans today. So, uh,
Oh, yeah.
but what can you do? What can you
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
But
And plus, because of my work schedule, we're doing this kind of later in the day than we normally do too.
yeah, well, it's all good.
Mhm.
Well, next week, it's your. I think we're doing Green Long, so
Yes.
I'm really excited.
Yeah.
Because that's another band I'm familiar with, but it's been a while since I checked out their stuff. So I'm really looking forward to getting back on the horse with Green Lung, so to speak.
Yeah. And
And
I'm looking forward to seeing what songs you pick
me
from
too.
the.
Me too.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
It will. Well, you enjoy the rest of your evening, and those of you out there, check out the playlist Heather's put together and check out these bands. And we will, of course, be back next week.
Yeah, see you then.